forum commends the effort of the federal government of Nigeria in fighting the insurgency. However, the armed forces should intensify effort to secure hard-to-reach areas in the region and ensure safe access to farmlands and other socio-economic activities. The forum called on the federal government of Nigeria to ensure the deployment of state-of-the-art military hardware to the region. The forum recommends that the manpower deficit in the Nigerian armed forces should be breached by allowing the police to carry state-of-the-art weapons where necessary and be provided with strategic equipment like high-velocity tear gas, trackers, and armored personnel carriers, APC. The forum called on the Federal Ministry of Water Resources to ensure that attention is given to recharging the Lake Chad Forum from national water bodies and strengthen the river basins in the sub-region.
Welcome back. Turning our attention to security, well, particularly the Northeast one, which you just heard that comments from he heads the Northeast Governors Forum. We've got Professor Tanibi Alemike, criminologist, joining us from Abuja. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us today. Well, that submission, that conclusion by the Northeast Governors, well, that is their own version of what they think the solution can be. What does that say to you about the attempts to tackle and address this security challenge that we've got?
Thank you, Chaplain. I think with respect to the Northeast security challenge, I can identify with the governors that they're speaking out of frustration, desperation. But unfortunately, I think the recommendations are obviously, for now, as at now, not what one would expect. First, we must recognize that we use the military approach, heavy military approach since about July 2009, when this problem emerged from Bauchi attack and then, of course, Borno itself. And, of course, we've used almost full-scale war in the Northeast to defeat the insurgencies, and it has not worked. Of course, no one would deny the fact that major progress have been made. Some years back, even in Abuja, people were so scared to go out because of fear of being attacked through bombs and other mechanisms by the Boko Haram. But we must understand the causes of insurgency. Insurgencies usually arise from political, economic, and social factors. And if you must defeat it in the long run on a sustainable basis, you must identify those political, economic, and social factors that give rise to them. Military have their places, but of course, it must be a short-term measure. Otherwise, you militarize your society, you then engage in what might be called a security dilemma, which warfare, in which there's competition between the insurgency and the government, with which has the greatest lethargy and lethal weapon.
Okay,
so
Prof,
I think one can understand the frustration, but that's not the way to go.
Okay, so how? Because what they came up with that suggestion because I think they've seen that in the short term, the security agencies from their perspective can't seem to respond immediately or have the capacity to respond immediately to some of these challenges. So with that recommendation, will that need or that gap be addressed?
From the military or security point of view, what is required is actually not weapon, it's intelligence. At that point, they need to know when insurgents are planning to attack, where they are supposed to be attacking, and what's the capacity that of force that will be deployed there. So at that point, it's not so much the weapon that is required that is more important than the intelligence. So I would have expected that they will ask that indeed there's need for a deployment or a greater capacity for intelligence gathering to the various media, both technological, human intelligence, and the rest options. Not, if you do not know, you could have the highest weapon, you'll still be taken unaware. So I think what has been largely missing in the Northeast situation has been intelligence. Why are they always caught unaware? And I think that should be the response, rather than whether it is the weapon that they carry. So I think it's the intelligence capacity that is important, to be able to gather intelligence, to be able to infiltrate and collect information that are required, and also to be able to share those intelligence and use them effectively. Because over the last 4 years, 5 years, I've been hearing new acquisition of equipment for the military, the Air Force, and the Nigerian Army particularly. So I think, yes, they need equipment, but I think more importantly, they need intelligence. Otherwise, those equipment will be useless.
I thought that if that were the case, it would be glaring that they really do need intelligence. But because many of them will wonder, if they do gather that intelligence, assuming that there's a gap there, how do they execute without those weapons? Shouldn't they go side by side?
Yeah, you require intelligence to plan operation. Yeah. So intelligence actually precedes operations. So without adequate intelligence, you are just walking, operating in a blind alley. And, it's not just gathering the intelligence that is also important. It is sharing it among actors. So you could have all the weapons. If you don't have the intelligence, you will not hit the target. And you'll be taken unaware.
Well, Prof, we have spoken a lot more about what the military has done, or security agencies and all of that, but you have mentioned 3 specific aspects that seem to have been missing out on: political, social, and economic factors. Are these facts unknown to us ab initio? And if we do know them, have we been able to track the root causes of the trickle-down effect of these lapses?
I don't think we paid adequate attention to those factors for various reasons. First, the factors that caused them in the first instance are also still around in other sectors. The political factors, the divisive political arena, the contest that are not based on any democratic principles, they are still all around, and therefore you find in different states, people are still recruiting all kinds of thugs and forming them into gangs. So we've not learned a lesson from the Northeast, ECOMOG, and, merging with Taliban and then forming what we now call the insurgency. Then, of course, in the long run, in terms of activity, it requires greater thinking, greater reflection to apply the economic, social, and political, measures to address insurgency. And it does require a lot of investment to do that, in terms not just financial investment, but actually, partnership among different agencies and addressing long-term inequalities, poverty, and worsening human development index, especially in that part of the country. So it does require a lot of thinking, a lot of commitment. I think the problem we've had with using almost relying solely on military approach is the fact that we think it's a short-term measure which would provide us with the final solution. Unfortunately, it will not. We've gone beyond a Boy Scout approach to this issue. We need a long-term planning to begin to indeed create an atmosphere which undermine their capacity to recruit new members and to deploy them for this action. But as long as the grievances, the political, economic, social grievances are pertinent, we will just be playing, an unfruitful game.
You've used the word insurgency more than, once or twice now, but a number of times we have heard that a significant number of these security challenges we're having now are related to banditry and criminality. But you have used the word insurgency. Are we missing something?
I think there's a lot of poor classification of what is going on in the country We use the word insurgency, we use terrorism, we use banditry, we use cultism, but these are different phenomena. For example, what we have in the Northeast qualify as an insurgency in which terrorism as a method of executing insurgency had been adopted over the last 10 years. While in the Northwest, we're having a combination of criminality going on that we have not fully understood, and we're putting them together as just banditry. And there are some cells of terrorists operating in that region? Are there some elements of banditry in the true sense of it? Are there elements of just basic criminal gang operating in those areas? We've not done enough to be able to isolate. And unfortunately, I think our security system, maybe also those of us who claim to be academics in this area, have not done enough work. A good example was the Niger Delta militancy before the peace, if you call it the peace agreement. Everything that happened in that region, we call them militancy. But because of the peace agreement, we can now distinguish the fact that all that was going on in Niger Delta were not all about militancy, that a lot of criminality were, had taken place and taken root and of significant, manifestation. So we need to classify them differently. In the Northwest and Northeast, basically what we start in the last decade is an insurgency in which terrorism, you can have insurgency that will not normally use a terrorist method. A terrorism is a method of actualizing insurgency. So that's, I think the Northeast will be talking about terrorism insurgency, not banditry.
There's a school of thought.
Banditry, but of course that is coming on the back of the terrorism, the space created by terrorism.
There's a school of thought that believes that, look, as presently constituted, we can't get results with this security architecture. Do you subscribe to that?
I do. And these are my reasons. First, I think we brought the military out for too long. We've stretched them too thin. We've civilized them contrary to what they are expected to do. And at the same time, because from 1993 thereabout, we had also decimated the police, and we have politicized the arm of the police and also decimated their capacity, that's the mobile police force. We now have a gap in terms of an appropriate agency or force to deal with the kind of insurgency that we have, that will not undermine the traditional role of the military, and at the same time will not in a way, militarize the police. We need an intermediary force between the police and the military so that the military can be in the barrack, except out only in exceptional cases, not the way we brought them out in the last 2 decades. And then for the police, of course, we know that the regular police cannot use the kind of weapon that the Northeast governors are advocating. There are reasons why, as much as possible, it's required that the police are never armed with very lethal weapons. They are part of the community, and the more lethally weapon they are, the more they are alienated from society. And that was the logic between the establishment of the police mobile force around 1962 and 1963 to create a barrack intervention force that is very capable of addressing insurgency. But unfortunately, that group has been decapacitated by the politicians who now use them as bodyguard or security guard. So we really don't have that kind of force that we require either in the present time in order not to civilize the military, which will be disastrous in the long run when we do have some challenges in which they are supposed to play traditional role.
Now, the police, there's been this conversation about the policing components missing in our fight against terrorism. They see in other crimes how as soon as they face that challenge, there was a separate approach to it, so the people could see and could relate to what was set up, such that it wasn't us and them. They could relate to that. So what do we do now about the capacity of the police to handle some of these things?
Well, I think it's first, right from the presidency to the Nigeria Police Force to the Police Service Commission, a lot of confusion that currently exists in the way to build the capacity of the police need to be cleared. For example, there are recruitment going on, and there are disputes about who should recruit, who should not recruit. That cannot be a basis for which you can then enhance the capacity of the Nigeria police force. We must say for the police, they do not have the manpower. I think they were going the right direction from somewhere, some years back, I think from the tenure of MD Abubakar and Solo Arase Suleiman Abba, when they were, the intelligence gathering capacity and utilization was drastically enhanced and developed. Well, then we have 2 years of decline in that capacity. I think in the last 1.5 years again, that capacity building has resumed. So I think that's in one way, because when we talk about policing in Nigeria, unfortunately, we still think about manpower. Policing is now technologically driven, and those technology particularly are technology for intelligence gathering and then of operational management. So it is not so much the number of people that are required. As you know, Chaplain, in many parts of the world, you do not require people to be at the junction, controlling traffic and running after people, as we do in Nigeria, where you have about 5 different agencies at junction running after people, looking at who will make a mistake. The camera is just there to pick you up and issue your receipt and the rest of it. So it's no longer an age of manpower in that sense. It's an age of compact manpower, well-trained, well-equipped with technology, relevant technology that can be used to police the place. So I think part of the problem in the Northeast, as you said, which is one of the problems we have now in terms of returning police to police in the Northeast, we did not, make them part of the initial policing architecture of the insurgency. It was seen as a wholly military affair. And that also accounts for the fact that we couldn't prosecute quite a lot of the people who were arrested in that field. Because the military are, with due apology, are trained to kill and to destroy. So when they confront insurgency, they destroy the building and in the process destroy even the evidence. And then you can't prosecute. I think that's part of the challenge. Whether it's too late, we need a lot of deep thinking of how can we insert the police back to play the appropriate role. That is the conversation that should go on at the highest level of security policy decision making now.
One thing that we've seen is that every state in this country, they have one form of policing or the other. It could be whichever vigilante group, the ones for traffic, different things that different states have. So that is a way, that's clear to them that there's a huge gap, inefficiencies on the part of uniformed agencies to carry out certain functions. So why then do you think that we seem to be playing the ostrich to hit the nail on the head and say, look, it's time we do something about either policing or the way the army functions from the perspective of the laws? Why are we not doing that?
Well, Chaplain, very well, the way we solve problem in this country is if something is not working, we do not fix it. We buy another. And then there's another problem, we buy another. And that's why you find the confusion in terms of the number of agencies and policing organizations that are out all over there. What countries are doing increasingly is actually to find a way of coordinating and ensuring enhancing collaboration among agencies. It's not in terms of increasing them. So you find a good example, you take the British policing system. Despite the fact that they have 43 forces, most of the decision coordination taken by the Home Office in order to have some kind of national security policy making that is coherent. Even the United States that, usually is said to be reputed to have more than 30,000 different policing agencies. With the passage of Home Security Act, a lot of coordination has happened. But unfortunately, very often, the discussion that go on in the security architecture, especially in the policing angle, is based on experiences of the 50s and 60s, where many countries were decentralizing and then, of course, forgetting, in fact, the development that has taken place in the last decade because of the increasing transnational criminality, violence, and terrorism. So we need the conversation. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the institutions that are responsible for taking this have to given them serious attention. And these are the National Defense Council, the National Security Council, and of course the Police Council. I think this national security policy making, they have responsibility. To do that, of course, you require a legislature that understand the security and then, begin to provide appropriate legal regime or framework for it. But unfortunately, the way our committees work, there isn't inbuilt knowledge of those committees about the issues they deal with. And that's why you find the crisis and the calamities we find in the countries, whether it's the notion of oversight or, the tendency for the legislature to be insisting on carrying out executive function. Because we do need a lot of collaboration between the legislature and the executive to begin to imagine and then, of course, design a new security architecture. Like I said, we really at this point must have an intermediary force, between the police and the army. It may be a new police force, entirely like the National Guard, or it could be that we rescue the police mobile force from the police and truly make them an intervention force with the appropriate capacity. Like I said earlier, the regular police cannot, should not, and must not use highly lethal weapons. Many of us are already, disenchanted with the AK-47. An average policeman encountered on the street should not be carrying AK-47. He probably should have a pistol.
Does that mean you don't trust the police to handle that? You don't trust the police to handle that, do you?
No, it is not a question of trust. It's a question of philosophy. The philosophy behind the police is that they are part of the people, and therefore they should not use force that is extraordinary. Traditionally we have divided security into two, external threat and internal threat. Police are supposed to relate with the citizens, fellow citizens, and therefore force ought and should be minimal. While in dealing with foreign, you are allowed to use maximum force that you can muster. So it is a philosophy behind the police. Police, as much as possible by principle, should not carry highly lethal weapon because it diminishes the collaboration between them and the citizen. It does not make them inferior. It does not make them weak. It is the philosophy behind it.
But just as you said, I thought you talked about different sections of the police, the PMF and several other agencies. Will it be okay for those groups or that category to bear such arms?
Yes, if you have the PMF like it existed in the 60s, 70s, and maybe early 80s, they can carry, that's the reason they were barracked. You don't see them on day-to-day basis. Where, Chaplain, if you remember, I think up to today, people people no longer call them because today they are not even efficient. When they were efficient, people actually call them, unfortunately, kill and go. But the appropriate word is actually quell. Quell. That means quell the riot or insurgency and then move back to the barrack you hand over to the regular police. So if you have a barrack intervention force, which is not in daily contact with people, carrying, can use more lethal weapon than the regular police that I'm supposed to call my friend, that is supposed to be the first point of call for assistance when I'm in distress.
Well, Prof, the concern here, the major concern here is the number of deaths that have occurred over the past 10 years or thereabout. The Nigeria Security Tracker, for instance, surveyed security, challenges over the past 10 years. And they came up, one of the several, things that they came up with, indices that they came up with, is the deaths by perpetrator. And they listed about 4 people who are perpetrators. Boko Haram is one of them. Sectarian, actors is one of them. Look at all these figures. These are the people that over the years have been responsible for the deaths of several people in Nigeria, almost 40,000 over the years. Now, the question that I would like to ask is, as I said earlier, as you have also said, we have looked largely about the federal government's intervention. What responsibility are there for states? Yes, a number of them are coming up with all kinds of, as Chamberlain has said, regional intervention networks and stuff like that, the Northeast, the Northwest, the Southwest, and all of that. What are the issues that you think the state actors themselves, the states, and I'm talking about the states now, the sub-regional level, and the local governments and the locals themselves, what responsibilities can they play to bring down these figures to the barest minimum?
You've asked quite a difficult question. Not the question itself is difficult, but because of the environment in which we operate. You know, many of the crises we have were created by the same group you are asking what is their responsibility. You find in Nigeria today that the state government, by their policies, by their actions, continue to create some kind of conflict-generating policies which are implemented. I take you a good example where your policy actually favors one religion against another. You are creating a problem for insurgency, religious grievances, and which of course might take in the long run the kind of insurgency and terrorism that we hope never occurred. Some are doing it in terms of the deliberate neglect of education of people. I mean, where you move around and you find millions and millions of children between age 5 and 12 not being in school, what these governments are doing is actually planting the seed for terrorism of the future. So they can play a lot of role. In fact, the primary role lies with the local government, and the secondary role lies with the state, and the tertiary, the federal government. In ideal situations, federal government should be a helper of last resort to the state and local government. But unfortunately, in this country, as we've noticed, nothing seems to happen in a very responsible manner in most states of the federation. Local government administration, which was local government in the old western region and native administration in the north, they've all been destroyed. So when you want to task them, you need to rebuild this system. We need a new framework that makes the state very responsible. For now, most state responsible governance system have collapsed. And, instead of a governor, a democratic governor, we're actually having emperors in the state who are ruining and damaging it. And I think from what we've had, part of the reason, not exclusively, of the problem in Borno had to do with this kind of irresponsible governance. So they do have a lot of role, but until you change the governance system where they are truly accountable, where the interest of the citizen is paramount, you are not going to get them be more responsible than they are now, unfortunately.
You cited a very critical example about the political factor that you mentioned the other time, talking about the policies that the governors come up with. How about the social and economic factors? Any examples of those?
Yeah, I mean, for the economic factor, if you notice, if you just look at, even inaccurate as it may be, the statistics of the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, you will find that long-term conflicts and crises in Nigeria tend to have been more prevalent in states with the widest inequality. In livelihood, in political power, and unfortunately, this is endemic in the Northeast and the Northwest, right, particularly.
Prof,
so
let me ask you.
You could find that there's a correlation.
The thing is, our security needs are immediate. We do need immediate solutions. Yes, the long-term plans notwithstanding, because if we don't sort those challenges immediately, people may just resort to self-help if they haven't already. What do we do about that particular concern?
Yes, I think very immediate thing is to sort up intelligence very, very rapidly. And there are many technologies that can be deployed. There are, strategies that can also be deployed to ensure that people, the agencies collaborate in very useful way. So, and that, of course, goes to the question of, are the military chiefs, have they outlived their usefulness? I don't think they've outlived their usefulness, but I think they are fatigued.
All right, then. We do thank you very much
Anybody
indeed.
thinks well when he's fatigued.
All right, we'll have to go, but we do thank you for your thoughts this morning, Professor Tanbi Alemika, criminologist, talking to us today about security. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away.